We're going to focus a lot on this concept called organizing. And here we're going to talk about organizing for success. A lot of times, if you do some solid planning, if you want to take your vision and values and actually make it come to reality, you have to do the planning, you have to do the organizing, because all the planning is cute unless you organize the things and make the plans happen. It's not going to sit down and it'd be nothing more than a bunch of hot air that was cute when you said it, except for the fact you now need to implement it. So let's organize for success. You want to look really as to what is the division of labor? Are you going to departmentalize it? What kind of processes, procedures, policies you're going to have? A lot of times you look at policies, but a policy is usually a big, broad, overarching aspect of it. So then you develop a procedure that does what the policy says. But a lot of times you have a practice on top of that as well. PPP, policy, procedure, practice. That being said, let me give you an example. We have a policy to hire faculty members at Irvine Valley College. Here it is. It is 3 pages long. It actually is 3 to 7 pages long, depends upon the month. Okay, so that being said, we have that. And then you break down the procedure. Okay, so whenever somebody comes in to interview, you want to make certain that each person has this, as you identify what each person on the committee is going to have. What that you aren't going to say in the policy or the procedure is, should you get the candidate that's going to interview for a job a glass of water? That would be a practice. So when you come down further, it just depends how much structure you're going to have for each different variation and each level. Policy overarching, procedure, how to go about doing it, and the practice is how are you going to take the procedure and implement it in a simple, practical thing with some dignity and respect in the process. So you always have a changing organization. We're looking at a lot of different things. We're looking at global competition. We're looking at declining economies. We're looking at massive technological change. We're looking at artificial intelligence now invading the workplace and eliminating jobs galore, and especially those in the IT area, which is kind of a strange thing. We're improving our IT and getting rid of IT workers. So you have that kind of thing. And then you're looking at the accounting firms will actually be trying to use it to try to eliminate their jobs. And we'll have everybody trying to do stuff. And maybe we'll all sit back and go to the beach in the meantime while the AIs do all the work. We'll see what happens. Okay. So you have a lot of pressure to protect the environment. We have changing customer expectations. We are spoiled beyond typical belief because we order something, we like to have it the same day. And I got to wait 3 days. What's the problem? If you go back in time, waiting 2 weeks was pretty common just 20 years ago. Now we complain about the fact that we get it the next day. We really are pampered beyond belief. So there's a lot of changes you're looking at. If you look here at the different aspect, the amount of mobile phone use, 34% to 95%. And I think it's probably higher than that right now. Most people are on the phones nonstop. Our phones are addictive. The number of blogs, you went from 12,000, now there's 600 plus million. Reality shows there's too much reality that isn't reality anymore. And the number of emails sent, emails, believe it or not text, but emails. You got that number. You have the hours spent online. We get a report every week on our phone saying, you have been up 20% this week because you had a crisis. Okay, you're down. How dare you be down? Number of daily newspapers. You went from paper to something totally different on top of that. So we get our news in multiple different formats, from X to Instagram to whatever. We have letters mailed. Okay, it went from 207 billion down to 187 million. What a massive reduction. So you're having these giant changes from printed to digital. Amount of books published. It went from this small amount to this amount. And everybody now is self-publishing. You can't go from self-publishing to somebody publishing you without having all kinds of different things. A publisher won't even look at you unless you're already sold 50,000 books into the self-publishing process. Let me speak from experience. iTunes downloads from 0 to 300 billion, and percent of obese Americans, 40%. We went from that, and we'll see what happens in the future. By golly, I don't know if we can handle the weight of the world on us anymore. You have a critter called economies of scale. Let me give an example. If you want to come out and you want to have your own cool polo shirt, you have beautiful designs, cuts and styles, and you have all kinds of different graphics you're going to have on your shirt. And you're looking at that, you go down to LA Fashion District, you hire somebody and you start cranking these things out, and you're doing really good. You're selling several hundred every week. You're excited about it and everything else. And somebody tells you, I got a deal for you. Here's the deal. You can buy them from this Vietnamese supplier, but you got to buy 10,000 at a time. But your cost is going to go from your $4.75 a shirt. And by the time you're done, you can get them down to really $1.10 each. $1.10. Whoa. And all of a sudden, but you got to pay for shipping. Huh? You got to pay for shipping insurance. Huh? You got to pay tariffs. What do you mean? And so by the time you're all done, you crawl back up. You're not the same rate, but you got to buy 10,000 at a time. So you got to buy 10,000 at a time. It comes across and it's coming by boat and it's really slow. But so you have economies of scale because you're buying a mass amount. And in Vietnam, they got this company, they're cranking things down. They have 75 workers on the line. They're making yours fabulous over here. And you and you have one small error, and 10,000 tops have one small error because you didn't properly code it properly and they missed it. That happens. It's called economies of scale. Vail came along and he had a couple things and principles of organization, and we still use it. So know the term economies of scale, and that means that the larger the overall project is, you can reduce the overall cost by buying more. Okay, so going from this to this. Vail took that further and talked about a unity of command. So when you start dealing in structure, okay, we use a lot of this. So here's the employees. They have one boss. Okay, and the boss has a boss, and the boss has a boss. You don't go around the boss to go to the boss's boss. Otherwise, they'll sit down there and they'll cut you off, and you'll be a loss by the boss. Okay, so that being said, unity of command is one, hierarchy of authority, a division of labor. If you're cutting shirts, okay, let's talk about the polo top. There's going to be cutters. They're going to have a bolt of fabric, snip, snip, snip. Here's a pattern I want you to have. Okay, here's the pattern for the medium size. Here's a pattern for the large and a pattern for the extra large. All this is relevant. Cut, cut, cut. We're going to make this many over here. And then the next person is going to take those pieces and they're going to sew them together. And the next person is going to take the collar piece and the sleeve piece and sew that together. You're going to have a series of people doing a division of labor, becoming highly specialized in it to make it go faster, more efficiently. And also the quality will be better because all they do is cut this side. That's a big deal. You want to have also the subordination of that person's interest to the entire organization, because if this person over here, if they're supposed to be cutting and they're on their cell phone talking, really they're putting their priorities over the organization. And authority, the degree of centralization. We'll talk more about that, what that means, but by centralization is the more you centralize things and the more you have one mind or one group deciding everything in the process, the higher the quality of decision usually, but the more control you have. Clear channels of communication, order, equity, a spirit de corps, trying to sit there and have everybody singing from the same thing. Employees have no more than one boss. When that happens, authority lines are clear. Rigid organizations sometimes, though, don't respond to the customers very, very well. You had somebody then, a guy named Henry Fail, actually took these things over here, the different principles, and we went through and paid attention to what is being followed today. Now, Max Weber then took the Fail principles and he went even further and he implemented them. And you'll see a lot of these in today's workplace, especially job descriptions. You hire somebody, what am I supposed to do? Well, here's your job description. Typically, a job description is going to have a couple of things on it. It's going to have some specifics. You're going to have a uniform format between all of them. You're going to have what is the name of the job, who the supervisor is. You might even have a grouping of jobs that are similar to it. So if you get hired at this level, you might get promoted to this level and to this level. So you have a group or a class of jobs. And you also have 10 or more duties to do, usually in rank order as to what this is the number one duty that you have, and this is number two. Usually they'll actually be structured that way, and it's a job description. Weber also talked about the written rules, decision guidelines. They want you to have all that down pat, and they also want to have consistent procedures. So this person over here cutting the fabric, they're supposed to follow this procedure, and everybody's following the same procedure. Okay, break time is at 10:15 every morning. Ready, set, go. They slip, and at 10:15, ding, 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 the bell goes off. Everybody sits there, takes their break. They take the break at the same amount of time, and they all return at the same amount of time. And that way, it's consistent with everybody in the process. Everybody's treated equally, and also the line shuts down, and you don't lose any progress because everybody is doing the same thing at the same time. You also want to do staffing and promotion based on certain qualifications. He promoted this entire structure, and by the time it was all done, he talked about the concept of mechanistic versus organic. If you have a less educated workforce, what he's saying is that they're fine for certain types of tasks. If it's a matter of slinging burgers, it's a matter of you can have somebody working that job. You can train them in a couple days to do a relatively efficient job on it. And if they're on the job 2 weeks, they might do fabulous in the process because it's a matter of very mechanistic and it's the same type of work. If you want to have a very complex job where people need to have degrees, people need to sit down and have a lot of creativity, we call that more of an organic workforce. And you'll see that a lot of times for coding, for different aspects out there, and for creative jobs. So he talked about the differences there. And then he also talked about a hierarchy. One person at the top, okay, and you have ranks in the process. You also talked about the chain of command. He took the chain of command further from fail and really identified it higher in the thing we call an organization chart. And you can actually pick up an org chart that really sits down and has your position in it, your boss's position, your boss's boss, the boss's boss, and eventually maybe your board of directors. That's all in the org chart. Here's an example of one that you can see over there. You might be in there in your own organization at one of these levels over here in the process. You might have more different levels. You might have less. It depends how it's all organized. Bureaucracy, we always tend to think about that as really a negative thing, except it is a structure, and sometimes it's a matter of trying to get information up and down the chain. Nowadays, the reality is information is readily available because we have so much technology at everybody's fingertips. Really, that's changed a lot about organizations. We'll talk about that, about the structure as to how that's really changed it. But we still need to always focus in on a centralized authority versus decentralized. Between the two concepts, you typically have centralization. You're going to have a larger, a much more cost efficient model if you have everything together and clumped, and you're going to have a lot of difference in cost effectiveness. You're going to have the same processes across the organization and more control to reduce the overall cost. The problem is when you centralize things, you start moving the decision making away from the lowest levels, the ones that interact with your eventual clientele. So you want to decentralize. A lot of times I see this happening. You can almost watch organizations about every 7 to 10 years. A lot of organizations go through a reframing of what they're doing. We need to sit down and have more control, more control, more control. So you'll see that aspect of it, and you'll see them start centralizing more to have tighter control in the process and reduce the overall cost. But the problem is people get fed up with that because what happens is the customers, the people out over here, which is who you're supposed to be serving, they lose touch because of the fact that these people here they're working with don't have any control. So they start decentralizing authority, and you'll see what I call the organizational wave up and down, centralized, decentralized. And you'll see a pattern that'll equate about every 7 to 10 years in a lot of organizations. So centralization, you save money, you have a tighter controls. Decentralized, you push the decision making down to the lowest level, and that way the conditions that they're working with on their customer will be most closely associated, and the customer will get better service between the two. Here's kind of a chart. You see on the left-hand side is a centralization structure, and on the right is a decentralization structure. So know a couple things. Know the basic principles of Fayol's principles of command, Weber's chain of command, especially about the hierarchy and the structure. You need to know the concept of centralization and then decentralization as well, because you're going to see it not just in this class. You're going to see it in the real world when you go out in your own business, whether you're an employee or the employer in the process, to see the world of centralization, decentralization, and which is best for your clientele or your company at that time. Organizing for success. Take care.